Okay. So in the interest of time, although we have adjusted the schedule this morning, but I'm going to be extremely brief to turn it over to our guests today. We are very fortunate to have the four people that we do have. We have Fred Smith to my immediate left from St. Francis House. You can all read these things in the front, right, except the old-timers that need glasses. You see Jean from Interise. I'm going to go by first names if you don't mind. Then we have Danny, who's here from Haley House, and Nick from Pine Street Inn. So we're here to talk about their experience with using some for-profit type or market-driven models to expand and improve the scope of their services to their clients. And happy to do that as I am, by the way, for those of you who don't know me, which would be everybody but my students, the director and founder of the Social Enterprise Institute here at Northeastern, which is our idea is business for global good, and we work on poverty alleviation through for-profit business models and systems. So let me turn it over to my immediate left to Fred to talk a little bit, introduce himself better than I did, and his organization, and then just talk for a couple of minutes about the topic at hand, which is the market-driven approaches taken by his enterprise.
Thank you, Dennis. Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me? Oh, great. Well, it's a pleasure to be here, especially on this dais with individuals representing organizations that I'm very, very fond of. As you can tell, I've been around a long time. Here you can see the gray, and the previous speaker mentioned the baby boomer. She was a boomer. Well, she's a piker compared to me. I was born exactly 9 months after VJ Day. That happened to be the largest month of live births in American history, and it began the boomer generation. So I am a self-proclaimed head of the boomers. And as a boomer, dating back to my days here at Northeastern when I was in graduate school, by the way, currently we are working with a number of other institutions here. We work with the newly formed business clinic of the law school, and I have the privilege of frequently testifying on behalf of inmates being helped by the clinic at the law school who are helping lifers get parole. Of course, in the current atmosphere of the parole board, that's not happening too often. I came to St. Francis House 17 years ago. St. Francis House has been around 27 years. In the first 10 years of its existence, it was in the business of keeping people alive. It was formed in the wake of the late 60s and 70s phenomenon of deinstitutionalization, where in this particular state, some 20,000 plus individuals were sent out of institutions, primarily mental health institutions, but also public health institutions, reform schools, and the like. That meant that 20,000 people walked out of these institutions. Where do you think they went? Do you think the state had set up wonderful places for them to go and get care? Of course not. They left. Many of them were distrustful of the system that treated them for so many years, and many of them had been institutionalized for over 30 years. One of the reasons I got into this business was my uncle was one of those people. And after 30 years in a state institution, his reentry plan consisted of a one-way ticket from Bridgewater to Boston and a slip of paper with the name and phone number of a minister on it. He obviously wasn't able to negotiate that and ended up on the streets. And later I had the privilege of helping him sort of get his dignity back and help him get housing and so on and so forth. And that really sparked the passion in me to help folks like this. And along came St. Francis House. And 10 years after their existence, they primarily, as I said before, in the business of keeping people alive. But the government was starting to be more interested in other things. They started to be interested in funding that would help people break out of the cycle of unemployment, addiction, incarceration, mental illness, and so on and so forth. So the Department of Housing and Urban Development offered St. Francis House a little bit of money to start a program to try to break through that. And I was hired to start that program. It's now known as the Moving Ahead program. And it's an intensive life skills and career development program that comes with residential treatment as well as a very intensive experience that helps people sort of figure out who they are and what they want to be when they grow up. And as I worked with these people and they started to tell me what they wanted to be when they grow up, An awful lot of folks said, you know what I'd really like to do, Fred? I really don't want to work for the man. I'd rather work for myself. And so it struck me, and by the way, a lot of the people I work with who happen to have been incarcerated from time to time, actually about 84% of all homeless people have had criminal justice experience inside. Many of them had been in business for themselves, if I can use that term loosely. I talked with many drug dealers who, if it weren't for the fact that they started using their own stuff, probably would never have been arrested. But what does it take to be a drug dealer? It takes inventory skills, negotiation skills, observational skills, all of which are easily transferred to the private sector and to legitimate businesses. So we started kicking around the idea of helping people sort of find their way in that journey. And so we started a group called Dream Ventures. And Dream Ventures is an entrepreneurial incubator. And we run classes, usually about 10 guests at a time. And we go through a process that helps them sort of focus in on what skills they have, what resources they have, and how that might manifest itself in some kind of micro enterprise. At the same time, St. Francis House has developed 4 or 5 what I would call social enterprises, affirmative businesses, the sole purpose of which is to employ people. One of the dilemmas I faced after I've been at St. Francis House 17 years, but after the 14th year, I got really frustrated. The world had changed dramatically in that 14 years, the world of access to work particularly. When I first started at St. Francis House, I could take almost any one of my guests, pick up the phone and get them a job interview. That changed. Anybody in the business notice that? Changed on 2 fronts primarily. One a legal front and one a technology front. The legal front was that lawyers got involved. Anybody who has a lawyer anywhere in their anywhere around them, whether they have one working for their company or one on retainer. Lawyers will always tell you what? Reduce your risk, reduce liability. Is there any liability in hiring a person who may have had some criminal experience? Of course. And as the lawyers took hold of the opportunities for employment shrunk, the state got involved in the mid-90s by creating Pieri regulations, effectively banning people from certain professions because of their criminal history, regardless of their rehabilitation, regardless of what they've done with their lives since then. They were barred. In one case, although we challenged this in court and won, they were barred for life. Technology took over when companies started realizing they could screen people much better using computers. Even what used to be called Pieri-friendly companies like Home Depot, they were always touted. Even the prison system would bring Home Depot executives into the prisons and hold job fairs. Isn't this wonderful? Well, now, you can't apply to a job at Home Depot without first going to a kiosk in the store or going on your computer. Your application is filed electronically, and what do you think happens to it then? Anybody? What? It gets filtered, and it goes to a third party who screens the candidates. And they screen them on the basis of educational, criminal, all kinds of screens that they have access to. And they effectively report back to the depot saying, sorry, we're not even going to interview you. And one of the things about our folks that we work with is they're good talkers. They've had to be. And the one thing they really need is to get in front of people and talk. So knowing that, we embarked on these job formation businesses. I won't tell you about all of them, but the one that I'm most fond of and most active right now, and we have decided to challenge the Chinese. How's that? In manufacturing. Wow. So we thought, well, there's a couple of friends of mine who are in the business of recycling and repurposing. They came to me and they said, Fred, there's this wonderful commodity called burlap. Anybody had any burlap lately? Burlap is one of the most ubiquitous fabrics on the planet. Every coffee bean ever grown has been shipped in burlap. And coffee is the 3rd or 4th largest commodity on the planet. And all of this burlap gets thrown away. fills up the landfills. So we decided, well, let's take that burlap from the roasters and let's make things out of it. So we're engaged in a business right now called Carry On, the repurposeful bag maker. We have cooperated, we have become partners with a dying a leatherworking shop up in Lynn, a fellow who was about to close his shop, but he had all these sewing machines that I could use, so we partnered up. We pay him a little bit of rent for his sewing machines. He invites our guests into his shop and teaches us how to sew, and we are making things. And we are presenting a business plan in about a week to my board. We need just a little bit more of a grub stake to prove our point, to prove that we can compete with the Chinese, that we can make all kinds of neat things out of burlap, and hopefully all of you will be willing to purchase them. My time is up.
Great. Gene, we'll hear more from you again.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Oh, my God, that's heavy.
Well, thank you all for coming out today and for clearing some mind space to explore ideas with us. I'm the CEO of a nonprofit called Interise. We're based in Boston, but we work across the country. And our mission is to stimulate the economic revitalization of lower wealth communities. We define the indicators for having done so for us are the creation of more jobs and good quality jobs, the generation of wealth, and the development of leadership, local leadership. The approach that we take to do this is based on research that came out of Boston University and the work of Root Cause that shows that existing small employers in these lower wealth communities who are stuck at the point where they're ready to transition into second stage businesses were the types of organizations in these communities that had the potential to achieve all three: new jobs, wealth generation, and leadership development, if the owners of these businesses could transition from being buried in working in their business to being able to work on their business and to take a strategic approach to building a sustainable enterprise. So then the question for us was, if this is where we're going to focus our approach, how do we help these businesses get unstuck? Well, first of all, you never help anyone get unstuck. You accompany them through the process. And becoming unstuck, how many of you are human beings in the room? Hands up. How many of you have ever been stuck? Yeah, stuckedness is the human condition. And all of us, whether in an individual, an organization, a government body, any gathering of human beings, get unstuck in the same way. First of all, it takes relationships. And it takes trusted relationships with peers with whom you can hear honest and open feedback and give it yourself. Secondly, it happens because we acquire new knowledge that allows us to reframe the point that we're at. And in that reframing, we identify new behaviors that we need to practice in order to act on what we've learned. So we looked at the stuckedness process and how we get people unstuck. We looked at the fact that our participants, our members, are adult learners. They're 30 to 50 years old, so they're very young. They're running businesses, they're hands-on, they're making payroll, and they have very little time. And what we developed to enable this stuckedness to be addressed was Streetwise MBA, which is basically a stripped-down MBA meets Weight Watchers. Weight Watchers is very good at getting people unstuck. So we decided also we would do something a bit radical in our field, which is historically small business development services have been geared at startups and at a very low fee, because at that stage many of them are in a situation they don't have any capital to invest in the growth of their businesses. Because we wanted people to figure out how to grow a business, they have to learn to pay for services. So we do charge tuition. And as a result of our focus on tuition fees and some other fees, we're 80% earned income. So we're a blended economic model. Why did we become a nonprofit? Well, first of all, our market can't bear the full cost of our product. They can't bear it until they've been in business about 5 or 6 years after they've been with us. We could have looked at some models where we were saying to them, well, as you grow, we get a percentage back. But remember, we're focused on relationship building. And what we decided to do was to really build incredibly strong relationships through which these businesses would continue to grow. What we want is the jobs, and that's what we get with this continued engagement. We also found that it was difficult to raise innovation funds, so by charging fees. So part of what we use the donations from our supporters for is to support the innovation costs that go with continuing to create tools that allow these businesses to grow. In 2007, we took this model and we began to look at, well, how do we scale it? And the question we brought to that process was, how do we scale mission impact while keeping a lean and innovative organization? There's a lot of second stage social entrepreneurs who've built very large organizations. And so some of our research looked at what they had done. And what we found was very high rates of staff turnover, and both in terms of percentage and in terms of time frame. What happens when a human being walks out of the door of the place where they used to work? They walk out, and you've got to replace what they know with the new person you hire. But there's something you can never replace, and that's they walk out with what they know that they don't know they know yet. It's called tacit knowledge, and tacit knowledge is the base for innovation and continued learning. So we wanted to build an organization that had a lower staff turnover, and that meant keeping it lean and keeping it focused very clearly on what only we could do, and then thinking about how we could partner with others to provide other services were very important. We also looked at the research of Jane Weiss-Skillion, who's at Stanford, looking at networked nonprofits. And we looked at Greg Deese's work on how you scale a social innovation. And lastly, we looked at software and IT business models. What we came up with was a very simple strategy: share and play well with others. Anybody been in kindergarten? You know this strategy. What we do is we license our Streetwise MBA to partners who use it in their own signature programs that build their brand and bring our program to their communities. Who in this room has a computer in their lap? What does that computer run on besides electricity and a battery? No, deeper than that. Almost every one of those computers has an Intel chip. You can have any make of computer, and what you have is an Intel computer, because without that chip, it's not running. So our strategy was to emulate, and instead of being Intel inside, we're Interise inside, but we can't use it publicly because of all that stuff that goes with copyright. What we're able to do is offer our partners a shovel-ready, award-winning, proven model at a license fee that's half the salary of the staff person you'd have to pay to develop it, and that pays for itself after 3 years if you charge tuition fees. There's no development costs. You're in a peer learning network, so you're getting all the evaluation. What do we get? All the innovation, rather. We get a 20% profit margin that we can use to cross-subsidize our Massachusetts Learning Lab, where we do direct delivery in 7 cities here, and also to help fund innovation. The result of this model is since 2007, we've gone from serving 30 entrepreneurs a year to almost 500 small business owners a year, and a total of 1,300 since 2007. We've gone from serving 2 cities to serving 35 cities, and we've seen jobs created at the rate of 12% growth through the recession, at the same time that the national average was 1%, and we've seen revenue growth continue for the majority of our businesses up to 30%. We've also seen 79% of our businesses report and actively engage in community leadership, and we've done it with a staff between 12 to 15 people. What have been the blockages to our model? You would think, my God, this makes sense. It should be in every city in the country. People are banging on your doors. Well, first of all, we're in a marketplace where almost everything is always free or very low cost. Our license isn't. It's cheaper than building it yourself, but it's not as cheap as a Kauffman Foundation funded program called Growth Venture. It also gets different results. We're not bringing a franchise or a branch to a community. We're working with the best provider, for-profit, non-profit, government, anchor institution, faith-based organization that works for that community, and working with them to build this program, this license with them. Since the recession, we've been paid a lot of compliments. People have been imitating us all over the place from the for-profit side, and they're building quick fix PR and marketing-related programs that are transactional and online. So they've played us the compliment of implementing our model, but none of them have yet paid us. So we're competing against the knowledge we put in the field that's been picked up by for-profit entities with a lot more capital than we can ever grasp. When we work with a community to put a license in, the existing funders, city, state, government, and foundations, aren't used to the idea that you put your money in the licensee that's the best for your community. Oh, we don't fund businesses. Or, I'm sorry, we can't make a grant to a faith-based organization. Or, we've never given money to a government department. But if you want the impact, you need the license where it's going to be most effective. So our licensees have a little bit of a long haul in raising their license fee. Ideal for us would be an investor, whether for-profit or non-profit, foundation or business, who would say, let's look at how we install this license so it will have longevity in this community. We'll take care of the initial startup, let the local member build the market, and be able to move into an earned income self-sustaining base. Lastly, and this is an interesting question for nonprofits, many of our partners know how to serve, but they don't know how to sell. And when you're asking a small business owner to give you 100 hours of time over 7 months so that they can transform themselves and their business, you've got to sell it if you want them to pay you for that. And as we know from one of our partners who offers it at no fee, you even have to sell it more when you don't charge them. So how do we move from a culture that looks at small business development in lower income communities and low wealth communities that's framed almost in a social service model? These are people who need to be helped, to a model that's actually based on community investment and wealth generation, and that looks at small employers as a key asset, along with anchor institutions, to building the wealth and the jobs of low-income communities. How do we understand that we don't always have to help or fix? Sometimes we have to accompany and learn.
Everybody hear me all right? Thank you for having Haley House here and be a part of this day. My name is Daniel Cordon. I'm the Director of Transitional Employment and Wholesale for Haley House Bakery Cafe. I'll give you the brief history. I want to touch on what Barry had shared with us earlier about the disparity, the economic disparity that exists in this country. Since 1966, we have been serving those that are without. We're the oldest freestanding soup kitchen in the city. In 1979, we were the very first homeless provider to actually have housing. In 1981, we secured an organic farm out in Western Mass, where we grow produce that helps subsidize our soup kitchen, our cafe. In 1993, we started a job training program for the men that used to come to the soup kitchen that had skill sets that they were able to turn into pocket change, micro businesses. And then in 2005, we partnered with the city as part of the revitalization of Dudley Square to go ahead and start the Haley House Bakery Cafe, which is a social enterprise. That cafe last year operated at about 83% sustainability. This year, we are on record pace to reach it at 97%. Our model is simple, and this builds on what Janet showed us. It's not because you can, it's because you must. You serve. Our population that others don't want to employ. Our population, those that have checkered pasts, drug addiction, broken relationships, all with the central theme of creating community. At the heart of who we are is about creating community. I'm not going to sit here and tell you guys about the economy. You know, I struggle to pay gas just like you guys do. You know, or meet my mortgage. But what I do know is this. is the power of the small enterprise. That when it's rooted and truly connected with its community, with the population that it serves, it has the power to change. To change just not the lives of the patrons that might come in, the men and women that work there, but to actually change a community. And when you're talking about economic disparity, you need to touch on this. It's about serving, it is about doing these things. And I will also say this in my outdoor voice. Look around the room. Who's not here today? When we talk about listening, it's about hearing the voices of the people that are actually there. The ones that struggle, the ones that need the assistance. And all too often we have these cookie cutter solutions. Let me just put you through this program, and we got 2 phases, and we'll pick up the phone and we'll try and it's not a knock on any of those. But we found in our 45-year history, though, is at the very root of that relationship. That's where the hope and the inspiration comes for that person to then go ahead and make change for themselves. And that you're simply there for the ride. And whether you're in the modality that we are, as a food service industry cafe, or whether it's a building trade venture, whatever it may be, you are simply there for the ride. And you pray and you hope that the ones that come through, that a majority of them will succeed. But you have to listen, because they're going to tell you what they need. It's not your vision. It's not your immediate short-term Band-Aid. It's being able to listen to the community and actually see where and how it is deficient. So at Haley House, we are that quintessential grassroots, small nonprofit, human service provider that, guess what, if we change our minds tomorrow and decide to revamp our program, we're not bogged down by just red tape and bureaucracy and paperwork, but because we have a group of men in front of us that say, hey, I'd really like to learn how to do some public speaking. Quick, somebody call Toastmasters. You know? Or if they come to you and you say, I really don't have anything to do with the family. Quick, Sunday we're going to have family day in the cafe, and we're going to show movies and have food, and everybody can bring their family. We respond to the immediate need of our community. And if there's anything that I can share with you, is that today, when you walk out of here, is really, really stop, listen, and look at what your model is. And if 90% of what you're doing is not being derived from the information given to you by the people that you have elected to serve, there's something wrong with that picture. That doesn't take away from the spirit of wanting to be able to help and to be able to give back. But if you really want to be able to change the slides, and if you really want to be able to really reconnect communities, this is the level of conversation and honesty that it's going to take. Because Janet did say it, and I believe it was you, Janet, that said it. There are a large number of nonprofits that are going to fail. There are a large number of nonprofits that are in the way if they choose to stand alone. And that you have to partner. We've partnered with Criminal Justice Commission, with the halfway houses through our Transitional Employment Program. We take men straight out of the halfway house. They get out of prison on Thursday, potentially they could be in our cafe on Monday interviewing. And we will walk with them and be the underpinning and get them through that difficult period. Skill development, personal development, life development. Get them reassociated with their family, with their community. Re-immerse them into responsibility, the civic engagement, volunteering. That's community building. Or the after-school cooking class that we do with kids in the neighborhood. We bring them in because guess what? At the end of the day, we all eat, and we are not that different. And to be able to use food as a vehicle just to have an honest human conversation that deals with healthy eating as well and obesity. but then overcome stereotypes, right, and just cultural differences that we allow to keep us divided. That builds community. Or the 109 units of affordable housing that we have in the South End. In the South End, yes. Or the soup kitchen that's in the South End, yes. That's there as a voice onto its own that says, there is a problem and you need to be mindful of this. And that you cannot just push a problem away through gentrification. You can't just make it somebody else's problem because we need to put a nice restaurant here or a hotel. All right, that community building, everything is a natural response out of the conversation that happens. So our marketplace and our strategy is simple. What do you guys need? Hey, can we do that? Do we have money for that? No. All right, let's start a cafe. All right. What's the problem with food? How come they're going hungry? Because they don't have a job. Let's start a job training program. It was always the natural response to a very honest question. But we have to be willing and brave enough to answer those questions. And I'm going to leave with this. It's just next time all of us come to an event, to a conference, to something like this, let's also bring what we've decided to commit ourselves to. Let's bring somebody with us that can also share a voice, because that voice is missing here today. That doesn't take away from what we do, but it's not whole. And in community building and in fixing, all are present, all are connected, and all are responsible. So it's not just can we, it's everybody that must. With Haley House, we're here and we will continue to grow, and we will continue to just naturally respond to the questions that are presented to our community and to our city. And we'll draw from people that are successful, from the Pine Streets and from the St. Francis House, and we'll share and we'll talk. We went through Interise because they're doing great things. I mean, we are the consummate networkers with Whittier Street, Goodwill, Discover Roxbury. I mean, there are so many partnerships, and that's what's allowed us to be successful, because we can't do it all, but we sure as heck can put you in contact with somebody. So keep up the forward thinking, keep up the dialogue, just make it honest, make it real, make it with those, the end users, as well as the creative geniuses that are in the room, because that's when change comes. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Nick?
Thanks, Danny. That was great. So I'm Nick Pieri. I manage and direct Boston HandyWorks, which is a job training program and social enterprise at Pine Street Inn. Pine Street Inn is a homeless service organization for homeless men and women in Boston that provides street outreach and emergency shelter, as well as substance abuse treatment and supported permanent housing, and the job training and placement. And Pine Street just yesterday officially went through a merger with another homeless service organization, Hope Found. And so through that merger, our job training and placement efforts will be much more comprehensive, and we're really excited about that. We have the first social enterprise that Pine Street started is a food service enterprise called iCater, and they prepare about 1,000 meals a day and also do corporate catering. Boston HandyWorks provides property maintenance, carpentry, painting, and housekeeping services, and we work on Pine Street Inn properties as well as for external customers. So right now I'm just going to talk briefly about how and why we began and why the social enterprise model works well for us, and then just a couple of our challenges that we faced. So HandyWorks trains 36 individuals a year, so it's pretty small. They go through the program in 8 weeks, and after the 8 weeks there's additional opportunities for further skill building, mentorship, and work experience. We launched in 2009. Pine Street was already operating an in-house job training program for folks who like to work with their hands, and we were having trouble funding it. So we were at the same time, Pine Street Inn was paying a lot of external contractors and vendors to do a lot of property maintenance and construction work on our buildings, and we realized that a lot of those jobs would provide excellent training opportunities as well as saving Pine Street some money. So we started doing jobs on our houses and painting decks and doing things like that were great training opportunities. And at the same time, we started going out into the community and doing some work for external customers who were paying some revenue back into the program. It became really clear that homeowners and businesses and churches and other organizations really appreciated the opportunity to support a program like this and to meet and interact with the people who were working on their properties. And it was a really great relationship building and just experience for the trainees. So at that same time, the on-the-job training, whereas before we were kind of more classroom-based, more vocational training, it seemed really clear that the on-the-job training was the best kind of training, and that real experience to put on a resume and to use in an interview was really where it was at. And again, in listening to the trainees who were there tell us what they wanted and what worked for them, and to sort of see experientially how that happened is why we continued using that model. It really encourages teamwork and confidence building in a big way. One thing that the trainees talk about a lot is that the positive momentum that comes through work, through getting up every day. Some people leave their house at 5:20 in the morning in order to get to work on time, and then put in a full day of work, working with their hands and working hard all day. So that kind of positive momentum just leads to other good things for them. The social mission is really the reason why we exist, and is the reason why many of our customers contact us in the first place and begin using our services. But the reason that customers come back is because of the quality of the work we do. It's the quality of the products and the services we provide. So when everything goes back to quality and doing the job right, doing it professionally, then the trainees really begin to take that on. They gain the skills and the perspective that's necessary to make them not just good with using a paintbrush or a hammer, but that makes them really valuable employees out in the workplace. In doing this, there's constant trade-offs between the financial bottom line and the social bottom line. And especially in the handyman and maintenance business, time is money. And so when you take the time to teach people how to do things, to show them the right way to do things, that takes a lot of time. When you let people make their own mistakes and then show them how to fix those mistakes, it takes a lot of time. And so we're always trying to find that balance there. The educational benefit to doing this on-the-job training is huge, and it's also being part of a larger organization. Having the other programs and staff at Pine Street to provide supportive services is really important. We also have a really great network of volunteers that we use as much as possible. We've worked with volunteers to create workshops on entrepreneurial activities for people who want to start their own painting business. We've worked with volunteers to create financial literacy and professionalism in the workplace type things, and customer service. So that's been really important. One thing that Danny talked about a lot was community building and relationships, and that's been one of the most important pieces of what we do. For people who've been homeless and have likely experienced a lot of isolation and estrangement from family and from their communities, forming trusting relationships and working as a team and having mentorship from supervisors who care about them is a really, really important piece. And one thing that touches me is that trainees who've gone through some very difficult experiences, people who have experienced deaths of close friends or family members, when we've asked them, do you want some time off from work? They say, no, I want to come to work. I want to be there. it's been really touching to hear more than a couple people say in circumstances like that they call our dusty workshop their safe place, and so they want to come and they want to work and they want to be, they want to be around their peers and around people who care about them, and they want to work hard and feel good about themselves in times like that. One of the biggest challenges we've faced is that the demand is great for both on the programmatic side and on the business side. And in order to do this right, as I talked about before a little bit, the staffing and adequate supervision for us is key. And so because of that, we're not able to take in as many trainees as we'd like or take on as many business opportunities as we'd like. We're currently scheduled into June with our work projects, and we just had 38 people interview for 6 training slots. So we'd like to be able to do more, but because of the supervision, that's been really difficult. One big lesson that we learned when we launched is that we were taking on any and all business opportunities. Any phone call that rang saying, "Can you do this?" we said, "Sure, we'll do it." And that really stretched us too thin. And we went to places that were a bit outside our comfort zone and did some things that just didn't really play to our strengths. So we're trying to be a lot more judicious with what we choose to do now. And as far as our successes, I won't go into a lot of detail, but we're busy and we're growing and we're helping people to change their own lives. And it's the trainees who come through the program who make it work. And they really buy into this idea 100%. And so they're working hard every day, not just for themselves and for their own futures, but they buy into this business idea of working really hard now to do the best at every single job we do to create great customer experiences so that we build the business so that someone who is in their shoes in a year or two from now can have that same opportunity. So, thanks.
Thank you, Nick. So everybody, we structured our panel discussion today to give the audience an extensive opportunity to ask questions. I wanted to ask the first question, if I may, to anyone who would be willing to volunteer, which is, my students won't be surprised at my question, which is, would you consider a conversion to a for-profit model, either all or in part? And could you see having a greater impact and access to more types of capital if you did so? Anyone who wishes to answer?
It's certainly something we've thought about. One of our concerns is making sure that the price point for the participants is still something that they can afford, and we don't end up displacing the group that we particularly are targeted at. I mean, one of the things that's been interesting is we've grown nationally. There's all kinds of people say, every small business that gets to this point needs your program. And so, I mean, one of the things we've been thinking about is a little bit further down the road, how do we set up a for-profit side that's basically getting the program in the hands of people who are not 91%, sorry, not 99, but 91% of our participants are women, minority-owned, Native American-owned, immigrant-owned businesses, or businesses located in lower wealth communities. And my board would probably say, if we can keep that percentage, they'd certainly be open to considering it.
Offer a comment?
I can say with Haley House, I don't think that was ever on the plate. I don't think it ever would be. I think it's possible. We are always bound, if you will, by our mission first. We'll lead with that. I mean, that does not change. In a traditional business model, you know, it's 1, 2, 3, this person's out, next. There's a role, there's a responsibility that needs to be met. With our commitment to anybody that comes into our organization, it's always to go that extra mile. So the business model would have given up on them, but the Haley House model doesn't. And historically, that investment in the individual has reaped tremendous benefits. When it comes to our ingredients, our produce, some of our wholesale accounts. We've had opportunities to do things on a larger scale, but again, remaining true to our mission, local, fresh, small, independent. We haven't even aligned ourselves with these opportunities that will really propel us onto a whole nother level. We always have to be mindful of who it is that we are and who we want to remain, because if you don't, you lose sight of that. The dollars, you can get everybody if you're not careful about that. As long as you always keep that focus on the relationship and on the people that you serve, it makes it that much more effective. And for us, I think it would muddle that. And our social enterprise, as it works, is labor intensive, takes a lot of diligence, a lot of flexibility, but we've made it work. And I think that's something that we would definitely not change.
Danny, would your answer change in any way if the model that I'm speaking of is owned by your clients?
Now you're talking. Because that actually has become an empowerment piece. At that point, then it's transcended what an organization is doing to what an individual is doing, or a group of individuals. And for them, and like Fred, you mentioned, many of these men they're business savvy. They understand what it means to positioning and just all the things that would make them very good salesmen. They have it. So if you're able to have the Genes of the world come in and sort of work with them and give them that structure, for the for-profit, they would be very, very successful. And with the men that we serve, you would not have to ask them to give back. These are men that came in my training program. I'll share real quickly. They're getting paid more than minimum wage, not quite a living wage. We're getting there. And they actually donated a portion of every shift to the people that were in the soup kitchen, so that they would have hats and socks for Christmas. These are men that are coming out of incarceration, that have reputations of not caring about anybody but themselves. Humanity, when given the opportunity to shine, it will meet the challenge. And so for those men, even the for-profit, I think they would do well.
Anyone else care to?
Yeah, if I could just talk quickly to that. I think that a lot of the folks who come through our program have had really negative experiences in the for-profit construction world, have been taken advantage by contractors, have not been paid, have worked for people who are less than reputable. So I think working for a for-profit that treats them right, if it was a collective ownership, if it was something like that, I think would be a great idea. Back to I think that if we operated on a for-profit model, our labor hours would be much fewer, and we would to keep that training as a important piece of it would be really important, and we wouldn't be able to create or to send people out to get other jobs, because our trained workforce would be gone. They're going and getting jobs at other companies. So as soon as we train them, they'd leave. So that part of the model, we'd have to actually hire people on after they finish. But it is something we've talked about.
If I could just briefly, I couldn't agree more. I think the people that we serve in particular bring with them equity, whether that's sweat or whether that's actually, in many cases, a financial equity. Most of the people that walk in our doors, and I'm sure the doors of these other organizations, they have been given a safety net by the government, SSI, SSDI, those kinds of things. They perhaps are living in a shelter, not paying any rent for that. They are coming to places like St. Francis House and eating 2 or 3 times a day, not paying anything for that. I would argue that some of these people have more disposable income than many of you. If you're receiving $800, $900 a month and you have no bills other than your cell phone, so I'm a big advocate for of reaching into that, both the sweat equity and the financial equity, and empowering people by giving them the chance to pay for some things. If you don't pay for your meal, if you don't pay for your clothing, what value do you place on it? 0. And one of the issues that we have, I think, is that people walk around entitled. They feel as though, well, I'll get this over there, I'll get this over here, and I can spend what I have on whatever I want to spend it on. So I think we should move toward a model where we draw upon their sweat equity and their financial equity to give them a stake, give them skin in the game.
Take questions from the audience now. I think there's some students with microphones if you want to take advantage of that. Yes, sir.
Thank you so much for the work you do. We really appreciate it. Thank you also for bringing innovative programs to the community. My question is more around funding. When you started this project, or when you thought about this project, what did you see funding for innovative funding in the Boston market? And if you're looking at it right now in 2012, April 2012, what would you like to see?
Sure. Whoever wants to step in.
The cafe itself was actually a partnership through a grant, Startup Capital, that was awarded, and then also the city working with us. Something was touched on earlier, though. I think the climate right now, in everything that I'm reading, and to really tap into that individual donorship and the crowdfunding, there are vessels that can be put together that really take the best of all the different models and create this equity pool from which we can go ahead and you can actually engage a lot of the larger projects. The smaller projects, I think, are just, sweat and tears, and really just grassrooting, cultivating it immediately. The people that you're serving, the people that are committed to those individuals. But the larger project, I think now it's no longer that, well, let's get startup money, to the tune of $150,000 to open a restaurant. They'd be like, excuse me? But you could gather together, a group of people to say, listen, this is a social enterprise, this is a vision that we have, and we'll give you a stake in it. Because that's different than just a straight donorship. There's always the investment piece. People need to have something given back to them, just as they need to be able to give something away. And when you do that, then you make everybody a stakeholder in the process. So that's something that I'm seeing that swing towards, so that there is a return and not just a straight grant and go on your way and hope you do well.
Gene?
So this is where I get to give a shout out to the Smith Family Foundation. We incorporated in March of 07, and in April of 07, they gave us a 3-year capacity building grant, which they renewed for 2 years, and over our first 5 years gave us almost $650,000, with us setting our performance benchmarks, us using it to build our plan. The only requirements we had was to have a plan, and then to basically use their money to achieve it. We could be strategic at the beginning. We put in place the funds to build the curriculum. We built the evaluation system, which is what we've raised all of our funding on since. If you go on our website, this is our annual report card, and we're indebted to Root Cause, and Andrew Woke, as one of our founders, helped us create this process from the beginning. We've spent a lot of money building it out, so it's very robust, and it gives us incredible quality assurance, which is why people like to take out a license. And then the other thing that Smith allowed us to do was hire before the need, so that we could bring people in and get them in place and take opportunity. So if anyone in the room is a traditional funder, I think going to have a chat with Lynn Doblin, who's the head of the foundation now, or visiting David Ford in Belize to pick his mind. It's just an absolutely brilliant way to take an innovative idea and allow it to go to scale in a way that's planned and thoughtful and is based on what you learn rather than what you've been told you should be doing.
Charlie Clement with the Ashoka's Youth Venture. Gene, you mentioned switching from charging a fee to, from providing services for free to charging a fee. Can you talk about some of the considerations in reaching that decision, some of the obstacles you met in implementing it, and how you overcame those obstacles? Thank you.
You're assuming we have. There are many people in America and many people coming out of the organizations that I'm sitting on the panel with who work with people who have an idea and understand that they can engage in entrepreneurship and increase their economic standards and that of their family. There's work at Babson that describes these people as entrepreneurs of necessity. And for them, there's a number of very good services that are free or low cost that need to be there and are incredibly important. But the 20% of the businesses that are started in the United States, well, I'll ask you this, how many businesses are still in business 3 years after they're started in the States? What's the percentage? 20%. I gave you the clue, come on. 80% of businesses are no longer in existence 3 to 5 years after they start. And there are all kinds of reasons. That doesn't mean they failed. Sometimes it's people just realize that's not what they want to do. So being able to have a robust field of support for earlier stage businesses is really important. But if you survive startup, if you're at the gate of second stage growth, there's a behavior you have to learn, and that's to pay for the services you need to continue to grow your business. You can use some free services, but they're just not going to get you there. And the people who come from traditional communities with a lot more wealth, you'll have a CEO who takes a Vistage program and pays $16,000 a year to do that kind of support. Our program, the cost is $8, we charge $3, and during the recession we've cut the price because people were really stuck. Price is usually not the problem. The real problem is, how do I find 100 hours of time? Did you worry about price or time?
No, we were all in.
You were all in.
We were all in.
Can you please get us more like you? So it's a long sales cycle. And that the way we've overcome that is we're learning how to do it. Like I said, nonprofits have trouble selling. We've had the same challenge. We've had to learn how to do that ourselves. And the value proposition in a low-income community is the same. Your business grows. You live the American dream. But understanding what you have to now do, which is let go to get there, is counterintuitive.
Next question. We have time for...
Hi, my name is Paulina Migalska, and so my question is sort of a twist on our moderator's question. I wonder, sort of to all of our panelists, if you were just starting out today, you're not an existing nonprofit that is starting from scratch, would your answer to our moderator's question be any different? Would you, in that case, perhaps consider a nonprofit form? And I'm asking specifically because I used to work for an organization that supported rich nonprofits, advertising nonprofits that then grew out and sort of decided to support all sorts of social enterprises. Nick will probably know the organization, Social Enterprise Alliance, and I believe Anne started the international chapter. So, twist on the moderator's question, would if you're just starting out today, you don't have a nonprofit, you just have this social enterprise idea, would your answer be different?
If I may, we actually have this discussion frequently, and I'm always arguing with my boss. I threaten her. I say, I'm going to open up right next door to you, and it's going to be a sustainable model. I don't know if it will make a profit or not, but I'm going to empower people. I'm going to charge people for their meals. I'm going to give them a stake in the rest of their lives by allowing them to work toward whatever it is that they're getting from us. And I think there's something there.
Anyone else? We can do one more question then, if anyone else wants to comment on that one. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Louise Sawyer from the Learning by Giving Foundation. Jean, you mentioned key funders, the Smith Family Foundation, and then you used the root cause as... Hi, can everybody hear me now? Louise Sawyer from the Learning by Giving Foundation, and Jean mentioned both Smith Family Foundation and then Root Cause as key funders to your effort. Do you know if there is a place where funders can talk to each other and inform each other about what you're doing so that they feel more secure. Those organizations clearly are tuned in, but it sounds like we need more funders, more philanthropists, more foundations who understand what you're doing.
So root cause's investment in us was even more important than funds. It's been knowledge and insight. They're not giving away money. Okay. So there's a couple of things we've thought about. We think there needs to be a case written about our relationship with Smith and the way in which Smith and us have worked with each other, which needs to be discussed. And if the business school here would like to write a case, we'd love to have it. I'm not out of Harvard, so we haven't been able to get them too interested just yet. I think there's also, as far as I know, there's grant makers for effective organizations, there's grant make family, but there's not kind of like grant makers for social impact. There's not a Council of Foundation affinity group that's focused on this. And my concern would be it would be all foundations. I mean, if you look at most affinity groups, they're not made up of both of the silos coming together. And you can go to the school conference. There are episodes that you can participate in. But a learning community that's reflective of innovations in the field and funders who've taken the risk on it, I don't know of. I mean, maybe other people have an answer to that. But I think just in general, how do stories get told in this very diverse knowledge market that we're in?
Thank you for that. Yes, one last comment?
Follow up on that?
Yeah.
I work with the Charlotte Foundation, and I work with Catherine Girls, and it's tricky. We are constantly looking for new ways to find groovy groups that are out there with all the creative ideas. We'll work with the social innovation forums that are through Root Cause. We're constantly, working with Rebecca today and working with, what's happening over at Northeastern and at the Opportunity Scholars and the Torch Scholars. Oh, but it's constantly, who's doing what, looking through the websites. But you're right, there needs to be, I love the idea of some kind of, a groovy group idea.
Well, and I'm one of those nonprofit geeks. I'm a systems thinking, engineering, design type. And I would just urge in the moment of recognition to actually spend some time applying some systemic thinking and thinking about where the leverage point is and who is best positioned to convene action around that leverage point. Because often it's not the obvious, but taking the time to map out the current system and where it could be is incredibly helpful.
So thank you to our panelists today. One closing comment I would make, which is that we often hear people talking about nonprofits need to learn from business, and given what we learned from business in 2008 and 2009, business has an awful lot to learn from nonprofits and the talent and capability and ideas of the people on our panel, and hopefully business will become a little bit more like nonprofits going forward. So thanks very much for your time. Thank you to the audience.